Shout out to G-Man Boxing.
Alright, people. Tyson Fury. Now, Tyson Fury makes some very bold claims with regards to his resume. He claims that he's the best heavyweight of this era, which he may very well be. I mean, I would say between him and Usyk, it really is a case of 1 and 2 who you'd have as number 1 currently. I mean, you could have it in whatever order you wanted. I wouldn't mind if you had Fury 1, I wouldn't mind if you had Usyk 1. But in terms of all time, he proclaims himself to be the greatest heavyweight of all time. Now, it's such a big one because you look at people like Muhammad Ali, who cleaned out over 2 eras, who had 17 plus world title fights, over a long period of time, over 2 eras in boxing, the 60s and the 70s. And he fought everyone at the time. I mean, there was no one you could say he didn't fight. You look at people like Lennox Lewis, undisputed champion. Lennox Lewis was a 3-time heavyweight champion. Yeah, he was a 3-time heavyweight champion. Tremendous fighter. Fought everyone who he needed to fight in his era and beat them all. And the fights he lost, he avenged. So, when we look at Tyson Fury, we delve into his resume. It's not as deep as a Muhammad Ali. It's not. He's fought the same guy 3 times. He beat Klitschko, he's beat Dylan White, he's beat another guy 3 times in Derek Chisora. But we need to look at it a little bit deeper. We need to delve in. We need to go from amateur, start of pro career, to now, and we'll put it in context at the end. So we'll do a little career review. We'll say little. This could go on for about an hour. These career reviews tend to be long. But we're going to ask the question when it's all said and done. What the fuck happened to Tyson Fury? Alright, as I so often do in these career reviews, in these WTF videos, I have a little talk about the person's amateur background. Now, BoxRec, their amateur records, they're not accurate. That's the best way to describe it. I mean, they have Tyson Fury down as 20 and 5. He had a lot more amateur fights than that. Now, it wasn't at an amazingly high level, his amateur career. He always maintains that he was held back in the amateurs. He was held back from Olympic Games, things like that, due to his gypsy background. That's what Tyson Fury feels. It's one of the reasons why he turned pro in 2008. He didn't even try and go through the Olympic cycle. It was just right into the pro games. Turned pro with Mick Hennessy. And if you look at his amateur resume, there's not many names there that you'd really recognise. The one name that jumps out at you is one that he fought in November of 2006, and that's Michael Hunter. And that is Michael Hunter, the heavyweight contender nowadays. Now, he beat Michael Hunter over 4 rounds, 4 2-minute rounds. Michael Hunter maintains to this day that he got the better of Tyson Fury and that he was done. He was done a job on the scorecards. Whether that's true or not, I don't know. I don't believe any footage of that fight actually exists. I think that is one of those amateur fights that, unless you were there, you can't really comment on it. So, but I could see how someone like Michael Hunter could give him fits in a pro ring and an amateur ring. Now, Fury ended his amateur career in June of 2008. He fought in Lancashire. He fought a guy called Sean McPhillippin, and he beat him up on points. Now, that was his last amateur fight. So that was in June of 2006. Come December of 2008, he'd already turned pro against Bella Goisic, who was 3-9-2. Now, that was on a Mick Hennessy show. It was on the undercard of Carl Froch versus Jean Pascal. So when Tyson Fury turned over pro first, he was trained by a guy called Steve Egan. He wasn't working with Peter Fury. He was promoted by Mick Hennessy. So it's not really a stellar, background in terms of teams. Mick Hennessy, that was probably Mick Hennessy at the height of his career. Frank Warren at the time was the main guy in the UK. You had Frank Maloney just under him. And then you had Barry. Eddie Hearn hadn't really come along in 2008. Matchroom and Barry Hearn were just toying with the idea of getting back into boxing. And they did put some shows on Sky. Tyson Fury actually fought on a Matchroom show. I forget which one it might have been. It might have been the Thomas Marcus fight. I'm not 100% sure. But this was Tyson Fury's early career. He wasn't doing an awful lot. He was regularly, active, But, that first fight, he was 261 pounds. So straight off the bat, we can see we've got a big guy here in Tyson Fury. But over the coming fights, his weight would come down. His next fight was in Wigan, Marcel Zeller, 21-3, which on paper is not a terrible record, but Fury was able to dispatch him in 3 rounds. That was in Wigan, and that was in January of 2007. So if you actually look at his pro career first, he's actually getting out quite regular, because he fought in December, then he fought in January, then he fought in February, got a win there, fought in March then against Lee Schwabe, that was in Birmingham, that was on a Mick Hennessy show, fought in April against Matthew Ellis, first round knockout, fought in May, so he'd been going a fight a month, which you never really see nowadays. Very seldom, you never really see that nowadays, and again, that was on a Mick Hennessy show as well. Then he fought Alexander Cezens, who was 3-6 at the time, and Fury was getting rid of all these guys by knockout, so he was doing his job, going in there, getting rid of them all. This was actually on ITV, so Fury's been on Channel 5, he's been on terrestrial TV, ITV4 did this one, had Nathan Cleverly on top of the bill against Danny McKinson. Nathan Cleverly, Jesus, that's a name, that's a blast from the past. But then we get to September the 11th, 2009, and this was when Fury had the first real crisis of his career, and it was in a fight here against John McDermott. Now, Fury weighed in 247 pounds in this fight, but I guess you could say, excuse me, that the John McDermott fight, and I suppose looking at Fury early on in his career in general, you could see from a physical point of view the talent he had there. But I think the issues that would plague him later on throughout his career, such as the fluctuations in weight, the erratic performances, and the erratic behaviour as well, this all was showing itself in little spots early on in Tyson Fury's career. Now, in the John McDermott fight, he had a very hard fight. He had a tremendously hard fight, and John McDermott, myself, many others included, feel as though he did enough, not just enough, he did more than enough to get the nod in that fight. However, at the end of that fight, Terry O'Connor immediately raised Tyson Fury's hands, and he gave the fight to Tyson Fury by quite a wide margin. You'd have to say, if you look at his scorecard, he only gave 2 rounds to John McDermott, which is bizarre really when you actually go back and look at the fight. John McDermott won the fight pretty convincingly, pretty clearly. So that was the first real blip on Tyson Fury's resume. Even though we came through it with a win, he showed vulnerability there, not necessarily in the chin department, but in several other aspects in that fight. And again, I say, looking back with the benefit of hindsight, you could say that maybe these were the chinks in the armour that were there, maybe possibly still there, although I think Fury is a bit more headstrong now than he was back then. Rebounded off that, had a fight then in 2 weeks' time against Thomas Marzak, got rid of him. Actually, no, he went the distance with him, went 6 rounds with him. That was in the O2 in Dublin. Then he fought Hans-Jörg Balask, I think is how you pronounce that name. That was on a Barry Hearn show. Beat him up in 1 round, had him down a few times. Then he fought John McDermott in a rematch, and again, this was on Sky. So both John McDermott fights were on Sky. Larry Olabamimo was on the undercard, as too was David Price. This was actually on a Frank Maloney show. Now, Fury was 270 pounds for that fight, so big lump in the ring that night against John McDermott. He was able to get rid of John McDermott, but he had a very, very tough fight. And Fury, straight after the fight, was very animated, very emotional after that fight, because it'd been very tough for him. Now, bear in mind, he still hadn't hooked up with his uncle Peter Fury at the time. He trained for the first year with Steve Egan, briefly spent a little bit of time with Robin McCracken, and was still trying to find his feet as a pro. He was still trying to find the best team around him. His weight was becoming not necessarily an issue, but you could see disciplinary issues from Tyson Fury, in a sense of his weight would fluctuate as so on and so forth. He started pro at 261, got down into the 240s. In this fight here against John McDermott, he was 270. And aesthetically, he really didn't look good in that fight. He looked, you could see it in him, the flesh to muscle ratio, it was apparent. When you see Tyson Fury nowadays, when he's weighing in the 270s, aesthetically he looks a lot better than he did against John McDermott. Yes, there's flesh there. He's never going to be the body beautiful type, but the flesh to muscle ratio is it's there. Whereas in the John McDermott fight, it just wasn't. He just looked aesthetically very poor. But he was able to get the win over John McDermott, was able to stop him, so he was able to progress with his career. So after McDermott, he fought Rich Power, who was undefeated at the time. He was 12-0, fought him in the York Hall in Bethnal Green. Again, that was on a Mick Hennessy show. Who else was on that undercard? Because when you look at some of these undercards, John Ryder was the only name that I really recognised there. When you look at some of these undercards, it's crazy to see the names that are on it and where some of the names are now. It's really crazy actually to look back at some of them. You see names like Nathan Cleverly, Carl Froch. You see Josh Warrington on a few. I think Josh Warrington had only a second or third fight on the same card as one of Tyson Fury's. I think it might have been the Hans Yor Basco fight. Then he fought Zach Page over there in Canada, fought him in Quebec, beat him on points. So Fury is getting back into things now. Goes back and then fights Marcel Nascimento over in the Wembley Arena, gets rid of him in 5 rounds, and then he has the fight which these were his first 2 major titles. So he fought for the British and the Commonwealth title. Now he'll be fighting a fellow undefeated contender. It was a contender at this stage. This was July 2011, and he will be fighting Derek Chisora. Now he wasn't War Chisora at this point. He was 14-0, came into the fight 261 pounds. And Tyson Fury, this would be the first of 3 meetings between these 2 men. The first of 3 meetings between Tyson Fury and Derek Chisora over an 11-year period. Now, Fury beat Chisora up, beat him up on points. Scorecards 170-112 twice and 118-111. This was a really good win for Tyson Fury because at the time Chisora was undefeated. People were kind of, you see, about this time, 2011, Tyson Fury was the only real heavyweight other than David Price at kind of domestic level. You know, you David Haye. If he hadn't lost to Klitschko at this point, it was not long before he lost to Klitschko. So David Haye was the kind of guy who was at world level. He was ahead of everyone. And then you had kind of everyone down under. Fury and Price were the main guys. Joshua hadn't even fought at London 2012 at this point. He was an afterthought. So Fury does the job on Chisora, fights Nicola Furta. Nicola Furta's been in there with guys like Deontay Wilder. He's just an out-and-out journeyman. Fury did what he needed to do against him, and then he fought Nevin Pajkic. Now, this fight here against Nevin Pajkic, this was on a Mick Hennessy show. It was on Channel 5. Had Lee Wood on the undercard. It had Chris Eubank Jr. on the undercard. At this point, Chris Eubank Jr., he had just turned over with Mick Hennessy, so you'll actually see Eubank Jr. on quite a few of Tyson Fury's undercards back in the early days of Mick Hennessy. Now, this was in Trafford Park in Manchester, and it was for the Commonwealth title. Now, Nevin Pajkic went into this fight undefeated, but he only had 5 stoppages. He wasn't a noted puncher, didn't really have any power to speak of, really. But Fury in that first round, he looked very off, is probably the best way I'd use to describe him. Nevin Pajkic was swinging a lot with that right hand. He was coming close. And in the second round, he landed a right hand to Tyson Fury and he put Tyson Fury down. Now, Fury showed good signs of recovery. He was able to get up and he was actually able to get rid of Nevin Pajkic in the very next round. But this really, you see, at this point, Tyson Fury, he didn't have the fan base that he has now. David Price was Tyson Fury's rival, about you want to say, at this time. And again, with hindsight looking back, you could say Price was a rival of Fury. Well, yeah, he was. At this time, Price would have been a rival of Tyson Fury 100%. And Price was going through, guys. You know, this was the end of 2011. 2012 would be really David Price's big year. And even prior to that, he was fighting guys like Tom Dallas, looking devastating against them. He came with a better amateur background. You know, he'd done well in the Olympics. He fought at a higher level as an amateur. So David Price, a lot of people were really banking on him. And you know, you Tony Bellew, remember, the heir apparent to the Klitschko throne. That was what he said. Tyson Fury gets, and again, you Tyson Fury, who was going in there with guys like John McDermott, going life and death with them, getting dropped by Nevin Pajkic. So you can see that Price is looking this way and Fury is looking this way in terms of how they're going about their careers. His next fight then was in Belfast. He would fight John McDermott, a cab driver. And John McDermott, that was his profession. He was a cab driver. He might still be. Eubank Jr. was on the undercard of that. He actually picked up the vacant Irish title in that fight. So we go into 2012 now. He fights Vinny Magdalone. And again, I think this was on Channel 5. It was. Had Eubank Jr. again on the undercard. You'll see that pattern going around. Lee Haskett and Steve and Stuart Hall had their first fight. I think they had 2 fights their whole career together. And Tyson Fury goes in, does the job, 5th round job, demolition job on this guy. But then he had the fight, December of 2012. December the 1st, actually. Fury weighed 248. Probably his best weights would be in the low 250s, the kind of mid to high 240s. Now, Fury at this stage was a lot younger. It was easier for him to get down to these weights. At this point, he would have started. Well, he would have already been training with Peter Fury at this time. So we were seeing a much better fighter come out. Now, he fought Kevin Johnson, Kingpin Kevin Johnson. Now, when you mention Kevin Johnson in 2022, Kevin Johnson is seen as just someone who goes in there to get bet up. That's the best way to describe him. He goes in there to try and give these prospects rounds. Occasionally gets stopped. You know, he got stopped by Joshua. He got stopped by Bacoli. Got stopped by a few other guys as well. So that's all Kevin Johnson really is now at this stage. I mean, how many losses he got? He's 21 losses, right? So that's all Kevin Johnson is nowadays. In 2012, he was 28-2. He'd lost to Vitaly Klitschko, and I can't remember. I think it might have even, was it Chisora who had the other L? I'm not sure, but Johnson was a contender at this point. All right, he'd been the distance with Vitaly Klitschko as well, which was no mean feat. So this was seen as a big step up for Tyson Fury. And the way he handled it, he went in there and he put a clinic on. He boxed very well. He looked fast. His judge of distance was brilliant. His ring IQ was amazing. He looked fantastic against Kevin Johnson without looking devastating. So you see, you had David Price at this time, who we're talking the back end of 2012. He had spent that year just going through people. Matt Skelton, Audley Harrison, Michael Sprott, etc. He'd been going through those guys, knocking them out in devastating fashion and looking devastating along the way. Whereas Tyson Fury, even though Kevin Johnson at this point was better than anybody that David Price has beaten, he looked brilliant beating him, but he didn't look devastating. And people were looking at David Price at the time and thinking, well, Price, he looks devastating. Fury, he's looked shaky against guys like Nevin Pikic, like against John McDermott. David Price, I think he was ESPN Prospect of the Year in 2012. So, yeah, Price at this point was really, he was seen as the guy everyone was putting their faith in. Again, Joshua hadn't turned over pro in the US. Ruiz wasn't really known. Parker wasn't really known at all. I don't even know if Parker returned pro yet. I think he might have. So the heavyweight division wasn't what we have today. A lot of these guys were just on the up and come, or they hadn't even turned over at all yet. And obviously we remember Tyson Fury gave the famous interview at that Channel 5 show, which I won't mention what he said about David Price, but he did call him a plumber from Liverpool amongst other things. For monetization reasons, we're not going to go there. So then we go into 2013. Now, Frank Maloney apparently made an offer of something like $500,000 to Tyson Fury to fight David Price for the British heavyweight title, which I remember correctly, I think Team Fury turned that down originally. Now, it's easy to look back in hindsight and say what would have happened. At the end of the day, you know, at the time Dave Price was undefeated, I would have been picking Tyson Fury to beat him, even knowing what we know now at the time. But it would have still probably been an interesting fight nonetheless. Would have been a big fight for British boxing, which they needed really, because David Hay had just lost to Klitschko. He'd beaten Chisora at Upton Park, and he was kind of planning his next move. There was talk of him facing Klitschko, Vitaly, and Manuel Charr. I think the Manuel Charr fight was already signed. David Price obviously goes and gets himself knocked out by Tony Thompson. So here we are in April of 2013. Tyson Fury's gone over to Madison Square Garden. He's going to fight former cruiserweight champion, former IBF cruiserweight champion, Steve Cunningham. Now, Cunningham was a very useful cruiserweight. Very useful. Couldn't punch. Couldn't crack an egg, even a cruiserweight. And he was 210 pounds. Fury was 254 pounds. Fury giving it all the bravado, talking trash in the build up to this fight. It was a tough fight. Tyson Fury still says this was the toughest fight of his career. He went in there with Steve Cunningham, and you could see from the first round, the speed of Cunningham was going to cause Fury fits. It did cause Fury problems. Cunningham, not a noted puncher, but threw one of the best right hands of his career in the second round, and it floored Tyson Fury. Floored him heavily. Floored him very, very big and very heavy. So Tyson Fury, I mean, looking at that second round, you could say, right, well, this could go one of two ways. Either Fury's going to have to change up his game plan and try and get the win, or he's screwed. He's out of here. He wasn't trained by Peter Fury for this fight either. He was trained by, was it Clifton Mitchell who trained him for this fight? I think it was. Because obviously Peter Fury can't get into the US. So he didn't have the comfort of having his uncle there to guide him through it. And I think that's why he was so erratic as well at the start of this fight. I mean, as well as that, he was struggling to pin Steve Cunningham down. A small moving target who's moving all around him. But he did eventually, he got rough, he got dirty, 2 points docked in the fifth round for the headbutt, but nevertheless he was able to actually get through this fight. He was able to stop Steve Cunningham in the seventh round. He moves on from that. Now, at this point, David Haye obviously looked at that Steve Cunningham fight and thought, I'm a cruiserweight who moved up from heavyweight, I'm fast like you, I hit harder than you, I'm more accurate than you, I'm going to take this guy's head clean off his shoulders. I'm sure that's what David Price or David Haye was thinking when he seen that fight. Because no sooner had this fight finished, it was announced David Haye, I almost said David Price there, David Haye will be facing Tyson Fury. Now, again, looking back in hindsight, you probably would have favoured Tyson Fury to win that fight with the benefit of hindsight, but it would have been an interesting fight. There was a lot made about this fight. HBO signed up to show this fight in the US. It was going to be shown on Sky Sports box office in the UK. It was a big deal. It was going to be a big, massive fight. The fight got pushed back originally. I think on Fight Week it got pushed back, and then eventually it got binned because David Haye, we didn't know at the time, but his body was falling to pieces. I believe it was the shoulder. That was the main issue originally going into this fight. He ended up having to pull a fast one, pulled out, and we didn't see David Haye for 3 years until he fought Demori in 2016. So yeah, that's how bad it was for Haye. Now for Fury, it was bad for him because going into that fight, that never happened. He looked to be in the best shape of his career. He really did. He looked to be in tremendous shape, phenomenal shape. He looked to be in the best shape of his career, aesthetically. So to have nothing happen, I guess looking back with hindsight, we can say, well, that's kind of how Fury is, because he took some time off. He took a good bit of time off. He wasn't back until February. And when he did come back, aesthetically, he looked really bad. Like, I mean, really bad. I think he ballooned to over 300 pounds following the David Haye fight being cancelled. And bear in mind, I think it was cancelled around about September and he fought in February. So over the space of a couple of months, he really did put on a lot of weight. He came back in February at the Copper Box. This is when he started fighting. He was still with Mick Hennessy, but he was fighting on a lot of Queensbury shows. Like this fight here at the Copper Box, this was on Box Nation with Frank Warren. He was working kind of side by side with Warren, and he was working with Mick Hennessy as well. And he came back against Joey Abel. So he'd been out of the ring for nearly a year, 10 months. And against Abel's really a journeyman. That's really all he is. Fury got rid of him in 4 rounds. It was quite easy. But aesthetically, Fury looked bad. And again, when I say in hindsight, Fury, we know that he kind of needs to stay in boxing because, what's happened to him in the past and stuff like that. And I think when the whole David Haye situation went belly up, he showed signs of what was to come. The ballooning up in weight. I'm sure there's probably alcohol and everything involved. And again, when he came back, he didn't look good at all. He looked, aesthetically anyway, he didn't look good at all. But he was able to get over that. He came back against Chisora. Well, he fought Chisora in November of 2014. This would be their rematch. Now, the first fight went to points. Fury did what he needed to do. Beat Chisora convincingly over 12. In this one, it was even more one-sided because Fury had improved since they first fought in 2011, and now Fury was starting to really show the kind of fighter he was becoming. He beat Chisora up over the course of 10 rounds. They had to pull Chisora out in the 10th round. The fans were booing. I mean, it was one-sided as hell. This fight right here was also a final eliminator for the WBO Heavyweight Championship of the World. Now, at this time, WBO was held by Vladimir Klitschko. In fact, actually, I think the week before, he just defended it successfully against Kubrat Pulev. He looked devastating. He looked very good against Kubrat Pulev. So Tyson Fury was next in line, but Klitschko was always going to have a voluntary, because it wasn't called straight away. So he had a voluntary in, I think it was April of 2015 against Brian Jennings. So Fury would have an interim fight too. So, and this fight, remember this fight because it's going to be relevant in a few minutes' time. He fought Christian Hammer. He fought him in the O2. He beat up Christian Hammer convincingly, dropped him a couple of times, stopped him in 8. Now Hammer's always been a fighter who he's not really got much in the way of heart. He's okay as a fighter. He's not terrible, but he's not a world beater. He has questionable heart, but he normally goes the distance. This was a much more lively Hammer as well than what we have now. And Fury was able to beat him up, take care of him in 8 rounds, no problem at all. Then it was announced, because Klitschko even gave an interview on Sky Sports where he said Tyson Fury next in line. It was announced that he would fight Tyson Fury in October. I think it was October 28th of 2015 in Dusseldorf, Germany. It was going to be on Sky Sports pay-per-view. Eddie Hearn won the broadcasting rights with Sky to show this fight on pay-per-view. Kell Brook was even meant to be on the undercard against Diego Chavez. Well, Klitschko moved this fight back a month, stemming due to an injury, I believe he said. And then obviously Kell Brook pulled out with that fight, pulled out with the card. So it would be Tyson Fury versus Klitschko, Dusseldorf, Germany, November the 28th, 2015. And in the build-up to this fight, Vladimir ever the man to try and play mind games? Well, Tyson Fury, he played him at his own games. Have a listen.
His training camp. We're in the sauna. About 10 guys in the sauna. And it came down to me and Vlad in the sauna. Do you remember this, Vladimir, at all? No?
I remember the sauna, and I remember the sparring partners.
In the Stangelworks Hotel.
Yeah.
It was all in the sauna, a few guys in there.
Yeah.
Everyone starts popping off around us. And it gets down to him, and I'm over the other side. And I'm thinking, I've only had 12, 13 fights. But still in my mind, I was mentally in a competition with him. In the mind.
Was it a competition?
Right, he can say what he wants, he can deny it, whatever. Yeah. But I was prepared.
What are you talking about?
I was prepared to die in that sauna before I'd got out. I stayed in for like 40 minutes.
I believe, I don't know, I don't remember exactly that moment, but I believe im Steinit in the sauna, people are walking in naked. So...
Who got out first?
He did. He got out first.
And what did you think at that time?
Fought mentally.
Now, Vladimir, that scene there, that sauna story, for me, I think that was really when Fury got the Klitschko mentally. Because Vladimir is not like his brother. Vitaly's a lot of respect for Vitaly Klitschko. Real mentally strong character, has a lot of fight in him, has a lot of heart. Just tremendous fighter as well. Vladimir is frustrating because he's a better fighter, really. He's more athletically gifted. He's got more tools to his arsenal than Vitaly. But for whatever reason, insecurity, I don't know. He always fought within himself. He always fought dirty. He always tried to have these petty little advantages in the ring. And he always tried to play mind games with the fighter. Fury was having none of that, and he played them back on Vladimir. And I think it affected Klitschko. I think it's one of the reasons why he didn't throw any shots in the ring when he fought Fury that night in Dusseldorf. Fury fought Klitschko that night. He looked brilliant. In terms of heavyweight classics, was it that? No. Was it an entertaining fight? Not really. But it did have you on the edge of your seat when you were watching it live. Fury, though, Fury wasn't the name he is now. So even him beating Vladimir Klitschko, it didn't elevate him to superstar status. Anthony Joshua hadn't even won a British title yet, or he did actually, sorry, but he was only at the British title level, but he was still a bigger name than Tyson Fury. So Fury was champion, but he still was kind of just an afterthought to the British public. And then we go into 2016. Now, the big talk was Fury Wilder in 2016. Vladimir had a rematch clause. Even though this was a mandatory defense, a rematch clause was put in place. Now, why Team Fury signed that and agreed to it is beyond me. It meant that the IBF had a mandatory that was due. It wouldn't be able, obviously Fury would never be able to fill it. So IBF title went bye-bye, strip, see you later, there you go. And Fury, he announced that he would be fighting Klitschko, we just didn't have a date yet. But before that, he went to New York at the end of January to watch Wilder versus Spilka. Now, he got in the ring with Deontay Wilder after it, called him a bum, all that good stuff, you know, just trying to set the fight up. But at that show, there were signs that things weren't alright for Tyson Fury. He was seen drinking a lot, intoxicated, drinking vodkas and orange juices. Some people were even saying he was on something stronger. And it was the first sign that things were not fully right in the life and in the head of Tyson Fury. It was announced in April that he'd be facing Vladimir Klitschko in July of 2016. He arrived at the press conference looking not in good shape, looking heavy, overweight, and, you know, still golden Klitschko, but he gave you no real confidence that he'd really be in fighting shape for this fight, put it like that. Well, then it was in June of 2016, and we go back to the Christian Hammer fight. It was announced that Fury had actually tested positive, along with his cousin Huey, for a banned substance called nandrolone, which can be found apparently in boar meat, in the Christian Hammer fight. Now, let it not be said he was clean in the Klitschko fight. This goes back to the Christian Hammer fight. Now, the big question in everyone's mind was, this Hammer fight happened in February of 2015. Why in God's name are we waiting until June 2016 to make these findings public? That much I don't know. That much I really don't know answers on a postcard. But it was a strange one. And also, Fury, only about a day or so after that story broke, pulled out, or pushed the Klitschko fight back, I should say, stating that he had an ankle injury. Now, do we believe that? I don't know. I doubt it very much. But he said it wasn't off, it was just being pushed back. It was going to get pushed back to October. But by this stage now, Fury's house of cards was crumbling. Everything was going wrong. He was drinking even more. He was gaining even more weight. He wasn't training. He eventually actually failed another drugs test for, you know, a bit of the old how you doing. And, you know, he admitted to taking it. So at that stage then, the titles were taken off and the Klitschko fight was pulled. It was announced the WBO title would be vacant and it would be fought between Joseph Parker and Andy Ruiz for the vacant title. Joshua had picked up the IBF title from Charles Martin, who'd picked up the vacant title from Fury. Vladimir was trying to win the WBA vacant super title. He was trying to fight Lucas Brown in Hamburg, which was going to maybe take place in the end of November in Hamburg, Germany. That fight didn't materialise. He actually would fight Anthony Joshua in 2017 for the IBF, and the WBA title would be on the line as well. So all the belts were stagnated, all the belts were scattered, and by the end of 2018 they all found themselves to Anthony Joshua, with the exception of the WBC, which stayed with Deontay Wilder. So Fury was out of action. 2017, it was a real poor year for Tyson Fury. That was probably him at the height of his depression, of his, you know, issues with alcohol, drugs, food, because he looked unnaturally heavy. Like, that's the best way to say, unnaturally heavy. His voice had changed. It sounded like he had a constant flu because he was just so overweight. His voice had changed, and to be honest with you, it looked like his career was over. I believe he actually retired at it briefly in 2017 before saying, no, I'm going to try and come back. It never looked like materialising. He went through brief little moments where he trained over there with Ben Davison and over there with Billy Joe Saunders in Marbella, but that was really it, and it was more so for a picture more so than it was anything else. So 2017 was probably Joshua at the height of his fame and Fury at the lowest of the low. And that's really how it was. But going to 2018, he was adamant that he'd be back in 2018. The whole UCAD situation, UCAD announced that they would be banning Tyson Fury. However, they'd be backdating the ban, which meant that he'd already served enough time out of the ring, so he was eligible to fight in 2018. Problem was, he was about 400 pounds. So he had a job to get rid of that weight. At the time, him and Peter Fury had a bit of a falling out, as well as Huey Fury. So he wasn't going to be trained by Peter Fury anymore. He's going to be trained by a new trainer, up and comer by the name of Ben Davison. Now, Davison had only ever been seen in there with Billy Joe Saunders when Billy Joe Saunders fought Akabov at the end of 2016. So there wasn't much known about Ben Davison. A lot of people wondered, could he even was he the guy for this? Could he do anything? Could he help Fury? Well, that remained to be seen. But Fury announced he'd be coming back in June of 2018 against a guy called Sefa Safiri. He'd lost well over 100 pounds in weight, so in terms of getting Fury in shape, Ben Davison was able to do that. But we needed to see how he'd look. I mean, at the end of the day, we only had to go on was Fury's last fight. He fought Klitschko in his last fight. He was in his 240s. He looked very good. He looked very fast and looked very sharp. Now we had a Fury in the 270s, coming off alcohol abuse, drug abuse, losing over 100 pounds in weight. We knew we weren't going to have that Fury from Dusseldorf, but how far gone would he be? Well, in the ring against Safiri, he looked terrible. He looked fleshy. It was there was more fights happening in the crowd than there was in the ring that night. It was just a farce. It was just a farce. Fury got rid of him in 4 rounds. Frank Warren himself knew, all right, look, this wasn't good. They wanted to get Fury out as quick as they could, so they got him out in December. August the 18th, 2018, Windsor Park, on the undercard of Carl Frampton versus Luke Jackson. He was going to fight Francesco Pianetta. Interestingly, Deontay Wilder, heavyweight champion of the world, who had just gone through some contractual issues to try and get a Joshua fight over the line, was ringside. He was ringside and he brought his title. Now, looking from the outside looking in, you could never have imagined you would have Fury versus Wilder in 2018. Could you really? There was a lot of talk at the time that, yeah, they wouldn't be announcing it in the ring, but they'd be announcing it in the days after. Now, Fury went in there against Pianetta. He was lighter in this fight. He was in the 250s. He was back in the 250s. But you could tell that the weight loss was having an effect on Fury. Because against someone like Pianetta, who at his best was only ever European, you could get away with it. But he looked weak. He looked sluggish. His punches had no snap on them. He went through it, clockwork-like performance, did the job, won it over 10 rounds. Then him and Wilder got in the ring. They had a little coming together, and it was announced that Wilder would defend his title against Tyson Fury. It would need to be announced formally, but it was happening next. And I was thinking, is Warren cashing Fury out? Is that what this is all about? Is he going to just go and cash out on Tyson Fury? Because that's just how it looked from the outside looking in. That he was just looking to say, he's never going to be the same again. Make a couple of mil off him, cash him out. It was announced towards the end of December that on December the 1st, I should say September, that December the 1st will be Fury versus Wilder. Now, I remember at the time I'd only just started doing these videos. I thought Fury was going to get knocked out. I thought he was going to get knocked out in the first half of the fight and it wasn't going to be very competitive. That's what I thought, because I'd seen how poor he'd looked in his subsequent 2 performances. But he went in there with Wilder on that night and everything came together. He raised himself to the level of his opponent. And he needed to, truth be told. He boxed brilliant the first half of the fight. I felt that he was winning this fight. However, in the 9th round, he got dropped by Wilder. It wasn't really a devastating knockdown. Lennox Lewis, who was commentating for Fox, said it was more just the weight than anything else. It was more probably just his legs being weakened from the weight loss that contributed to the knockdown rather than the punch. However, in the 12th round, it seemed like Fury was on his way to winning. Survived the 12th round, you're champion again. Amazing achievement. Really is amazing achievement when you think about it. But Wilder has the power. And in the 12th round, he uncorked the right hand, which knocked Fury out and knocked him back into life again. You know, how he got up from that right hand, I do not know. And those 2 10-8 rounds, they really played a factor in this fight. Because the fight ended up a draw. Even with 2 knockdowns, I felt Fury did enough to win, personally. But it was officially a draw. Now, Fury, in that draw, even though he didn't win, the amount of fans he gained from that performance, it elevated him. He announced that he would actually be fighting Deontay Wilder in the immediate rematch before he ended up going and signing a co-promotional deal with Bob Arum at Top Rank. So it kind of put the Wilder fight, like, what's happening with the Wilder fight? Is it happening? Is it not? It was going to happen. It was still on the table, but both guys were going to have 2 interim fights. Wilder fought Brazil, and then he fought Ortiz. Fury fought Tom Schwartz in June of 2019 over in America. No one had ever heard of Tom Schwartz, and for good reason. He looked absolutely terrible. Fury got rid of him in a couple of rounds. And then he would fight Otto Wallin in September of 2019. Now again, Wallin was, we all thought, maybe another Tom Schwartz. Although he looked better than Tom Schwartz. He was a southpaw, he was a mover, he was quite fast, and he cut Fury's eye really, really bad in their fight. A lot of referees would have stopped that fight. The cut was that bad. He was landing left hands on Fury. He gave Fury an extremely hard fight. The Fury came through it. He did come through it. He adjusted. He was able to come through it. But at that point, John Fury, the father of Peter Fury, who was watching that fight in the BT studio, he said things need to change. One, he's too light, losing too much weight too quick and just not being strong enough. And second of all, he's not improving under Ben Davison. He needs to change it up. Now, no sooner did that fight end that we got the announcement that Fury would be facing Deontay Wilder in 2020, February the 28th to be exact, 2020. He'd be fighting Deontay Wilder, but who will be in his corner? Christmas week 2019, he announced that he wouldn't be training with Ben Davison anymore. Ben Davison gone. In Sugar Hill Stewart, Javon Sugar Hill, the nephew of Emmanuel Stewart, the late great Emmanuel Stewart. He would be teaching Fury the Kronk style. Now, he had roughly 2 months to train with Sugar Hill. I personally felt that wasn't enough time to really indoctrinate yourself into the Kronk style, get familiar with it, and be at your best. I felt that going into this fight, you probably needed a bit of familiarity, realistically. Well, it showed what I knew, because he came into this fight heavier than we've ever seen him before, and he fought the Kronk style like it was taught to him since he turned pro. He went in there with Deontay Wilder. A lot of people felt Wilder was going to win that fight, and he absolutely demolished Deontay Wilder. He obliterated him. 7 one-sided rounds. Best I've ever seen Tyson Fury look. And that was that. Tyson Fury was the WBC heavyweight champion again. However, there was the issue of the rematch. So Wilder still had a rematch clause in place, which he activated immediately. So it meant that we were going to have to see Fury Wilder 3. Despite the fact the second fight was so one-sided, it meant for nothing. We were going to have to, unfortunately, endure Fury Wilder 3. But obviously everything kind of got pushed back in 2020. And going to 2021, Tyson Fury was saying that actually, no, I'm going to be fighting Anthony Joshua for undisputed. Never mind the mandatory. The mandatory's pushed back a bit. This Wilder thing, it can wait. I'm going for undisputed. And we may very well have been as much as this close from seeing undisputed be actually announced and made. Alexander Usyk, who was mandatory for the WBO at the time, was saying, okay, look, I'll fight Joe Joyce for the interim title. I don't mind. Get this fight over the line. And it looked likely that we were getting this fight made. However, the arbitration here, and Deontay Wilder and his team brought this to a court of arbitration. And obviously, the arbitration said, no, you got to fight Deontay Wilder. There ain't no undisputed. Ain't going to happen. Fight Deontay Wilder first, and then we'll talk about undisputed. So that's what Fury had to do. October of 2021, he went in there again, third time with Deontay Wilder, and it was a fight that we all didn't really want to see. But the third fight subsequently became the best out of the three, because Fury looked to be on his way in the third round, dropped Deontay Wilder. Wilder returned the favour in the fourth round and dropped Tyson Fury twice. And the second knockdown, Fury kind of looked up, and it was almost that look of, do I want to get up? I can get up, but do I want to? Well, he did, and he subsequently went on to beat Deontay Wilder in the 11th round, stopped him brutally, and that was the story. That was the Wilder-Fury story done, finished. We'd seen it over the course of 3 years, we'd seen it 3 times, it had now come to its head. Fury left champion that night. Now, Alexander Usyk had gone on and he defeated Anthony Joshua. We were hoping to see undisputed. Joshua had a rematch clause. However, he was willing to listen to some step-aside offers if they could get this fight over the line. Fury, however, wanted an interim fight. He wanted to have his mandatory defence against Dillian Whyte. Dillian Whyte was knocking at the door to get that mandatory over the line for a while. So it meant that undisputed would have to wait again. Usyk would go and rematch and beat Joshua. Fury had to go and face Dillian Whyte. He had his homecoming. He hadn't fought in the UK for 4 years. He hadn't fought in the UK since he fought Sefa Safiri. That was going to change. He was going to fight Dillian Whyte at Wembley Stadium. Record attendance, 94,000 people. Him against Dillian Whyte. The build-up was just non-existent. Dillian Whyte played his part in that. But we were getting these guys on fight night. And Fury, he fought one of the fights of his career. He really did. He fought one of the best fights of his career. It didn't really matter what Dillian Whyte did. He was never going to beat Fury that night. Fury played with him, outboxed him, kept him at the end of a jab, and stopped him with one big uppercut in the 6th round. That was it. That was all she wrote for the Tyson Fury Dillian Whyte fight. So, mandatory, gone out of the way, undisputed. That's what we wanted next. Well, Alexander Usyk stated that after he beat Anthony Joshua, he needed a bit of time off. Tough fight, tough camp, understood. Fury wanted to go out before the end of the year. A lot of talk that it might have been Anthony Joshua. It was close, I reckon. But for whatever reason, it didn't happen. We didn't get the Joshua fight. Instead, Fury had plenty in the top 10 to think of. Well, he wasn't looking at the WBC's top 10. He looked at BoxRec's top 10. And he decided, why not have a trilogy fight with Chisora? Well, there are plenty of reasons why you shouldn't. But you didn't listen to those reasons. You just went ahead and did it anyway. So he goes and fights Chisora again for the 3rd time. Completely pointless fight. Didn't understand why it happened. Didn't understand why so many people bought it on pay-per-view. Still don't understand why this fight had to happen at all. Fury beat Chisora. Beat him up over 10 rounds. It was completely unnecessary. It was completely one-sided. I still don't understand that fight even now. But ayo, Fury got the win. So that is Fury's resume in a nutshell. That is his 34-fight career. The one draw being the only minor blemish. He's still undefeated as a fighter. What are your thoughts on that resume? You know, I said at the start of this video, if you want to proclaim yourself the best of all time, you got to look at the resume. And I don't think Fury, truth be told, has the best resume of... Well, I think Joshua's resume is every bit as good. And I think that if you took the cruiserweight wins, Alexander Usyk is an all-time great. Right now, Alexander Usyk is an all-time great. We can't dispute that. He is. Is Fury an all-time great right now? The jury's still out on that question. The jury's definitely still out on that question. Greatest of all time, a heavyweight? No. Not even. He's not in that even argument right now, in my opinion. The Fury fanboys will tell you otherwise. They're that's the Fury fanboys. But realistically, if you're looking at it with objective eyes, far from it. There's still a lot more needs to be done by Tyson Fury in order for me to class him as one of the greatest of all time at heavyweight. That's what I think. And he says he doesn't care about legacy, but then says he's the greatest. So clearly he does. That is the career, the resume, the WTF of Tyson Fury. Let me know in the comments section what you think of this. I hope you enjoyed it, people. Smash the like button if you could. Hit subscribe, of course, as always, if you haven't already. For now, I'll leave you with that. Peace.